Thank you for joining us on the Person-to-Person Network. Welcome to Profiles in STEM, our career series where we feature an amazing STEM professional who is shaping lives and building the future. I'm your host, Katie Culbert, and if you haven't already done so, please leave a like and subscribe to our network. Joining me today, we have a very special guest, Professor Willard McCarty. Dr. McCarty is an Emeritus Professor of Humanities Computing at King's College in London, England. He is a Fellow of the Royal Anthropological Society and a Roberto Busa Prize Laureate. Professor McCarty is author of the book Humanities Computing, as well as numerous scholarly articles and book chapters. Dr. McCarty, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
It's amazing to have you here. So, Dr. McCarty, you are known in some circles as the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the digital world. I have to ask, did you always know you wanted to be a scientist? Of course not maybe specifically in digital humanities, but was there a specific moment that inspired you to first pursue a career in STEM?
Well, the family story is that I learned to read from a physics textbook, which I supposedly lugged around the house when I was little. I'm not sure if that's true, but certainly I was inspired to study, to learn by my grandfather, who was a Methodist minister in Illinois. He was constantly held up to me as the best thing a human being could do, which be to study and to learn. And I'm not sure why the natural sciences first got my attention. But I was attracted to physics and to mathematics at an early age. There was no one incident that, no heavens opening like a scroll and light shining down on me and telling me what to do. It just was the way things were for me in my early years.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's kind of how most people's lives goes on. It just kind of unfolds, and then you find yourself where you end up needing to be. And I think it's really impressive that you were carrying around a physics book just when you were little, because physics is not an easy subject.
Well, I found that out. I mean, my ambition to be a physicist eventually got me to the University of California at Berkeley, where I had been, where I'd given that paper from, elected to give a paper from the science fair at my high school. But when I got to Berkeley in the physics department, it was very exciting. I mean, Berkeley was at that time one of the places in the world to study physics. The place where Robert Oppenheimer and many other, and E.O. Lawrence and so forth, with the Lawrence Radiation Laboratory overlooking the campus on the hill. But due to an administrative mix-up, I discovered that I wasn't really cut out to be the next Oppenheimer, or at least I was told that. So I was ejected from the physics department and spent years trying various things out. So that was initially a frustration, but I mean, a deep disappointment and a frustration, particularly at a university like Berkeley, where the number of students and the size of the physics department and the competitiveness made me feel rather small. But I also got a job eventually. My family didn't have much money, so I had to work while I was a student, the way many students nowadays do. And I got a job at the radiation lab on the Hill, and worked for Louis Alvarez and several other famous physicists. I didn't get to hang out with them. I was too little a person for such a thing. But it was a chance to participate at a very low level in the making of physics, which was going on at the lab at that time, to spend time classifying subatomic interactions, photographs of them in a bubble chamber, and the measurement of them and the computing of the trajectories of these particles, which was used in a very complicated way, which I barely understood at the time, to help Alvarez and others discover new particles.
Wow, that's really interesting. And even though you were like rejected at Berkeley, you still ended up where you needed to be. And I think that's what's really important. So, Professor McCarty, you are a pioneer in the field of digital humanities and have created an exceptional body of work in what you refer to as computing across the humanities. Can you help our viewers to understand this interesting blend of STEM and the arts and sciences?
I wish it were more of a blend than in fact it turns out to be. I've spent many years blending the sciences, the natural sciences, and the humanities by way of computing. But mostly what goes under the label of digital humanities is too distant from the sciences. It is often said that the best students in the humanities start out in the sciences. Maybe that's true. I mean, it's very flattering for me to believe that. But what is true is that having a background in the natural sciences takes the fear away and opens up opportunities for studying literature, the arts, music, and so forth, that otherwise simply wouldn't be there to be seen, because the tools of the natural sciences, computing in particular, open up these vistas that otherwise are simply can't be seen. But this is difficult. It's difficult because our social institutions make these divisions between disciplines and segregate the humanities and the sciences into two different categories, which are very self-protective. So one has to work rather hard to reach across the gap between the sciences and the humanities and to blend elements of both. And the humanities have a great deal to teach the sciences and vice versa. So it's important work.
Thank you so much for that explanation to our viewers. And as you said, it is very important work, and I'm glad you are doing it. So, Dr. McCarty, you have spent a lifetime in STEM and have earned distinguished accolades that reflect your amazing career. In thinking about your career and experiences, is there one accomplishment that you believe most reflects your life's work?
There are actually two of them. One of them, rather surprisingly, I started out in almost by accident and never expected to get anything from it. It just was a job that needed to be done. And that is to build a network of people who were in digital humanities, in humanities computing, as it was called then, who were scattered all over the world, mostly in Europe and North America, and to provide a forum or a seminar, as I like to call it, for them to talk to each other at a fairly high level, not just to swap conference notices and the like, but actually to discuss things. This is the listserv, if you know what that means, a discussion group called Humanist. And it turned out to be the actual reason I was appointed to an academic position when I thought that it would never happen, because it got my name out there and it got me into contact with all kinds of interesting people. So the lesson to be learned there is don't always think you have to work for reward. It's more important to do what comes to you to be done, what you want to do. But the second, so that's the first thing that I'm, I guess, proud of. Anyway, I'm happy about. The second thing came about by a very different route. I became friends with a senior scholar in Cambridge, Geoffrey Lloyd, who has done, as a classicist, who's worked also with comparing ancient Greece and ancient China, taught himself Chinese and has worked for years doing historical studies of ancient Chinese science. And he started a conversation with a Brazilian anthropologist, Aparecida Vilaça, and he asked me if I might be interested in participating in a workshop which he was cooking up at the time with the Aparecida, called Science in the Forest, Science in the Past, which was to take a comprehensive historical anthropological view of sciences all across the world. We've had now 2 of these workshops and the proceedings have been published. And we're just in the process of organizing, well, actually organization is done, but we're in the process of writing our papers for the 3rd workshop this June. And that has given me a chance to take this view of computing and its importance for the sciences to a group of people operating at a very high level across several disciplines, and try to make an interdisciplinary conversation across all these disciplines. It's very exciting, extremely challenging work. So I'm very happy about that too.
Thank you so much for sharing both of those stories. The first one especially just shows how most of the greatest things that end up happening aren't ever really planned out, and they actually start off as surprises. And I think that they're both truly inspirational because they both show how much the importance of communication is in this line of work.
Indeed.
So, Professor McCarty, I think you will agree, careers always have a starting point. We are particularly excited to speak with you today, in part because of the connection you have to AEOP. Going back in time, in 1962, you participated in the Northern California Junior Sciences and Humanities Symposium. As JSHS celebrates its 60th anniversary, we wanted to ask you about that experience and how it may have influenced your life.
It was a combination of the greatest, for a 17-year-old, 60 years ago now, for a 17-year-old, the greatest intellectual thrill and the scariest thing that I had done to that date. I was very surprised when I was chosen to give a paper at a special seminar at Berkeley set up for this in this Junior Science Symposium. I did an experiment. Actually, it was an experiment in biochemistry in which I found this Scientific American article, which had discovered a mechanism by which plants awaken to the spring, depending on a certain a chemical change in a certain chemical that is caused by the shift in light, in the quality of light, from to the far red and from the far red. And this is one of the main triggers that causes everything to burst into bloom, as it's doing right now in the Northern Hemisphere. So I did this experiment. I basically replicated the work that these 2 guys who wrote the Scientific American article had done, and built my own equipment. I built a differential spectrometer out of timber and metal and diffraction grating and so on. So I ran this experiment and basically came up with the same results that they came up with. So it wasn't original work, but it was pretty exciting to see that I could do what two major scientists had done. So I wrote this paper, and I gave the paper in the usual way, read it out. And then after the paper was done, I was introduced to the two fellows who had done the original work, who were sitting in the front row. Now, had I known that they were sitting in the front row, I wouldn't have been able to talk. But it was great. It is difficult to underestimate the importance of that kind of encouragement, because for most of us, I think it was certainly true in my case, my high school education wasn't very good. Really, it wasn't. And for most of us, I think it's probably a fairly mediocre experience. But all of a sudden, to be taken seriously was, I could say, transformative. Maybe that's too inflated a term, but it was important. And so I'm extremely glad to see that the organization which continues this work still exists after 60 years. And I hope it continues for another 60.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think it's really impressive that at 17, you were able to build your own spectrometer using materials just like you had lying around. And I'm actually competing in this year's National JSHS, and I think it's an honor to be able to speak with you today, and in a way, sort of walk in your footsteps when I go to JSHS. As JSHS participants, we are where you were. What would your career, educational, and life advice be to a high school student with a passion for STEM and making a world a better place?
Don't be discouraged. Don't lose your idealism. The world is full of discouraging things and discouraging people. Hang on to what you want to do. Do what you do, as Moses Maimonides said, only out of love. So do what you love and stick with it.
Wow, Dr. McCarty, I think that's really great advice. I will definitely be taking it to heart, and I hope the viewers do too. As part of the AAOP 60th anniversary celebration, do you have a special message for the many JSHS participants and AAOP alumni tuned in and listening to this interview?
Just make sure that this kind of activity continues. Budgets get cut, priorities are rearranged. You may have to go to bat for the existence of the mechanism by which you're going to JSHS now, and I was once sent there. So give it your support.
Thank you for that message. And now I would like to thank my very special guest, Dr. Willard McCarty. Professor McCarty, it was truly an honor speaking with you today. Thank you for spending time with us. And to our viewers, please join us again for another exciting episode and another remarkable STEM professional. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our network. You have been listening to Profiles in STEM. Thank you. Katie Culbert, signing off.